I guess my interests are more in the detail than in the broad picture. I had an interesting experience recently where one of the engineers in the project came to me to talk about the big conceptual things, to do. He wanted to carve out, big things. And I told him I didn't know anything about that. I just packaged things. Kind of shocked him. But that's my view of what I do. And the changes that have been made, from one machine to another are really rather minor. So my want in life is to be left alone to do technical work. We each have our thresholds of how much human interaction we want with our contemporaries. And my requirement is rather minimal. I would say a few hours a week would suffice for me for communication with other people. And I can work alone the rest of the week. So that's, I think, rather extreme. So I'm not looking for the right word, not a team player in the usual sense, that I want the support of other people around me doing the same thing, giving me feedback daily. More of a loner. My daily routine is usually one of working alone in the morning for several hours, and then around lunchtime I make the rounds of the various buildings that I supervise, communicate with people, and that can take from just an hour to several hours and sometimes the whole day. But then if there's any time left over, then I end up going back and doing technical work again. I tend to work at home just because I have better control of the environment. I unplug the telephone, so I know that won't ring. And I'm sure it's annoying for people that are trying to communicate with me, but I think it's the best that I can do in terms of compromising various wants. As long as I communicate once a day with everyone and anyone can get a hold of me once a day, I think that's adequate. I'm sure other people might not quite agree with that. The only way I've been able to teach is by example, and that's a very slow process. I end up doing all the detail work myself, and I'm such a technical perfectionist it turns many people off. I'm the kind of compulsive person, when you walk by your desk and the telephone book's crooked, you straighten it out so it matches the corners of the desk. I mean, there's a category of people like that, and I'm one of those. I like to document my own work, and I want to make sure that the printer is absolutely perfect, so there are no letters that have flaws in them. And the ink has to be just right. And when I bind the book, I want to make sure that the corners are just right and the binding is perfect. Now, I find great satisfaction in that sort of detail, and I'm sure that goes into the other things that have made me a success in the sense of having good technical foundations for the things I'm trying to do. Without that kind of perspective of detail, it's very hard to be a broad brush artist, and I don't feel I am one. But it's a great help for making better and better packages. No, not really. The ones that I bought in 1977 or 8, when personal computers were still relatively new. The reason being, it helps in text editing, basically. What I use a personal computer for is text editing. It goes much faster than even an IBM with that little white ribbon that does the automatic erase for you. Ever so much faster. So I can accept tools at that level that are clearly better tools. However, I have trouble, I think, compared to average technical people in accepting new tools in general. I don't want the best tools in the world. I like to stay with very primitive tools, as primitive as will let you get the job done. And the reason is I find that the fancier the tools you get, the greater percentage of your time is spent working with the tools and not with the end goal. And that's a very fine balance. You can't very well anticipate with a fancy new tool. Where will that payoff come when you've stopped reading the instruction manual and you really know how it works, and it works every day, it doesn't fail all the time, and you've really made progress? In my experience is that's usually a long ways away from where you think it is when you start with a new tool. So I'm really reluctant to accept new tools until other people have tried them and I see that other people are making more progress than I am, then I can accept it. Just the detail, whatever it is. It's getting every little line to go to the right place. I guess I wish I could do it all myself, and that's the perfectionist part. But, you know, mathematics, you know, when you calculate it on the back of an envelope, that does not compute. There isn't enough time. And so I compromise by finding other people that I have the best confidence in to help with that area. But I would like to do it all myself. So I tend to go around a project, working first in one area and then another, to make sure I understand what's going on. And if I look at the real failures I've had, it's in areas that I neglected to follow through in the detail on. So that's what I'm doing today. To the extent possible, I want to delegate everything that has to be done, so that 100% of my time can be devoted to taking care of crises that come up that were unanticipated. Once you get a project started, that's the way that I found it best to operate. You know, I never thought about being remembered at all. I have no idea. I want to be remembered by the people I live with, being a person they wanted to be with. I want to be satisfied with myself when I die. I guess that's the most important. I did the right things, hopefully at the right times, although that's too hard to do all the time. Be comfortable with yourself. That's enough. You know, as you look at people and where they move, the pattern of moving away from whatever type of environment you were born and raised in and moving back seems so common. I went to Minneapolis for the middle part of my life and then moved back here when I was able to bring my work with me. And I think a large portion of people, particularly people that tend to work alone, would like to do that because you feel comfortable with the environment you were raised in, whatever it was, snow and cold or hot and sunny or big city or little city. The people that moved to Chippewa Falls with me, and I think there were about 30 at the time I made that move, those that came from small towns wherever felt comfortable and stayed, and those that were raised in large cities felt uncomfortable and left. So it seems, at least from my experience, a very clear pattern. We're imprinted by our environment when we're small, just like we're imprinted by our parents with how we're supposed to behave as human beings. So it sticks with you. complementary person. He was a complementary person as I viewed it. Just exactly the opposite interests. And yet deep down, he had basically the same technical view of world and product and company. So we were very compatible at the same time as being complementary. And I sensed this intuitively early on. And it seemed to be verified by the first few years of John's performance, first as being a financial man and then a salesperson. So again, you know, it's hard to take any credit for these choices. It seems to be pretty much luck. Can you take credit for intuition? I don't think so. I cannot. I think that someone leads us. I don't think we create our own paths. Quite often you can't see who the leader is. You can't identify it. You know, whatever spirit or form you want to call it. But I feel, if I look back at the important decisions that I made, I did not compute them. I did not figure them out at all. It just seemed like it had to be that way, and it was right. No. I hope everyone has those same basic intuitions, and people that get in trouble ignore them. I would hope that. I don't know that that's true. But you would feel like if that were the case, people who ignore their intuition, or whatever you wish to call it, and get in trouble, sort of deserve it. I mean, that's a dumb thing to do. You should always do whatever you think is right in the sense of your own morality, so to speak, in a very, very broad sense. So, it seems very simple. I thought, wow, there, that John Rollwagen is really off. He's far off.
Why?
On the other hand, I can see, particularly with hindsight perspective, that it makes a very positive contribution to the company. It's a very good thing to have done, but no way would I have ever done it. So I admire it particularly in that sense. It's a thing that John can do that I would never do, that makes a very big contribution. The first computer that I worked on, and I can't say I built it because this was only a year or so after graduating from college, was what became the 1101 computer for Sperry Rand today. It was at that time, of course, not Sperry Rand. But it was at that time the biggest digital computer. I knew nothing for reference, but I was just fortunate to be on that project because there were only 2 computer groups in the United States at that time that were working in the digital area. One was Eckert Mauchly on the East Coast of the United States, and the other was Engineering Research Associates in St. Paul. And having graduated from the University of Minnesota, it wasn't a long walk down to that particular spot. So I stopped there. It was my first call out of school, and I got a job. Just lucky. So I was shocked after 2 or 3 years. It wasn't that long, 1 or 2 years, to find out that although I was new out of school, that there wasn't anybody who knew any more than I did. It's really shocking. So away you go. So before long I was a project manager. And from there on there were a whole series of machines at Remington Rand, and I think I was there perhaps 7 years before starting Control Data, 1957. So I've gone through 3 cycles of essentially that. I don't think big computers are complicated. That's a picture that many people have. The bigger the computer, the more complicated it is. And in my mind, that's certainly not true. A Cray computer is very simple compared to a PC, for example, in the kinds of things it can do microscopically. Now, that's kind of, to some extent, unique, because I don't like to have complicated things that I can't keep track of. And so I guess the industry views Cray computers as being simple compared to competitive machines in their concept and in their detail. But surely they're not complicated machines. It doesn't take long for a person going to a class to understand them. I guess I have just a little bit of salesman in me because I know deep down, and I know intellectually as well, that people buy these great big computers emotionally. It's not necessarily that they need them at all. Now, those really in the business know what I'm talking about, but you would think that wouldn't be true. And so aesthetics, in the sense of the image the machine projects to the person making the decision to buy it, is very important. But that's probably not the real reason that I do it either. I mean, I can argue that's my justification for doing it. But the real reason is the same reason I straighten out the telephone book on the desk, is I want it to be as perfect as it can be. And if it's a crummy looking box and all I did was package it, it seems like that would be a failure. So try to make the box attractive. So color and texture are important. Physical shape is important. Try to dress those things. I ignore people that are far away because I don't want to take the time to explore it. And there are so many people out there in the world that I wouldn't know where to start. So I ignore generally what is in the press, ignore what other companies are doing. But I don't ignore the people around me who are doing competitive work in a very basic sense. And I think at least 3/4 of the things that I've done, I've taken from other people's work and modified. And I think that's probably the way most people operate. You get an idea from someone who is part of an idea, and you get another part from someone else. You put the parts together in some new configuration. And I don't mean physically, I mean conceptually. And so you have to ask yourself what you did. I mean, you can hardly take credit for inventing this thing, but to the extent that you've packaged it, okay? That's why I call myself a packager. There are quite a few people. John has been the most important person for Cray Research in the sense that he was the complementary person that was able to take a small company developed by a technician and make it a successful large company with all the human attributes that are present now. That never would have happened had I continued to run the company. It'd still be a small company. You know, and sometimes I wish it were, but not very often. I'm really very proud of Cray Research in its present form, and it's hard to find very many negatives, which is very nice. And I can take zip credit for that as I view it. The technical part, of course, is very important, but the developing of something that's been started, you know, seems to me to be a greater skill than just starting it. So I think clearly John is the person that did that. Many technical people have supported me, as, for example, S. Davis, and I enjoy working with them, and I hope they get the same satisfaction I do, and I feel quite sure that they do. Harry Runkle was another, and I really miss Harry, because he and I thought so much alike that we had to talk only about 3 words a week, and that's kind of a record. Harry was able to do the detail work that I like to do, in some respects better than I could do them. He was able to work on a very narrow area very carefully for a long period of time and be absolutely sure that what he concluded was right. I mean, that's the skill of a super technician, as I want to be, and so he was one of them. And so I really enjoyed working with him. There's room for as many of those people as you can find in our kind of business, and they're hard to find. I enjoy working with people who are able to work by themselves, and there are quite a few now that I've accumulated over time on the Cray 3 project. People who very much like I operate can work by themselves for long periods of time, get together occasionally for technical communication. And those people, in my view, are by far the most efficient and most creative people. If you need a lot of support around you to do your work, you probably haven't quite made it in the sense of doing something important, so to speak. If you follow me, important for self. You're not yet ready for the important for self part. I don't think I do. I think I pick people at random, and then they sort themselves out over time. Perseverance is the way you do it. If they don't get old too fast, then you can keep the ones that do the right kinds of things. But I have never felt successful in interviewing people and making a decision as to how they're going to perform. If I look at my own efforts in perhaps 30, 40 people who I made a serious effort to choose from an interview, say an hour or 2 hours of talking, I think my batting average is less than 50%, that they survive for several years or more. So I don't particularly feel qualified to judge other people. I'm impressed by superficial things that strike me as being like myself. And as you know, a view of self is one of the last things you ever get straight. And so one's perception of oneself as projected into another can be quite wrong indeed.